folks, I have an example for you that you might have noticed in the homework. For this problem, we're supposed to subtract two polynomials. Notice it says subtract negative 4m squared plus 5mw minus 12w squared from negative 10m squared minus 11mw minus 7w squared. Students often have a hard time when you read subtract this from that. Let me back up and just give you a quick example to help this hit home for you. What if I said instead subtract 2 from 7? What would you do? So if you subtract 2 from 7, you're actually doing 7 minus 2. Of course, that equals 5. So when it says subtract this from that, the that thing comes first. So I have to, when I write this problem, I have to write this second polynomial first. So I have negative 10m squared minus 11mw minus 7w squared. And I'm going to subtract the original polynomial that was listed. Be real careful. When you subtract polynomials, you must have parentheses around that polynomial that you're subtracting, because if you don't, your signs will be incorrect. When it says minus, it really means minus each one of these terms. And essentially, what that means is this minus is going to change every one of those signs. It's like we have a negative 1 right here, and we need to distribute that negative 1 inside the parentheses by multiplying a negative 1 times each of those three terms. So the next line I'm going to write as negative 10m squared minus 11mw minus 7w squared. And actually, that first parentheses there, I don't have to have those anymore. Now this negative 1 I'm going to distribute inside, and when I do that, I definitely don't have that second set of parentheses. So negative 1 times negative 4m squared is plus 4m squared. And then negative 1 times positive 5mw will be minus 5mw. And then negative 1 times negative 12w squared will be plus 12w squared. So notice how that negative, which is really a subtraction, changed every sign in that next polynomial that we're subtracting. Now the next step is not required. A lot of people do this in their head, but I want you to see how I group like terms. So notice I have this negative 10m squared, and the only other m squared I have in line is this 4m squared. So I'm going to group those two guys together. So negative 10m squared plus 4m squared. Now when you group terms together, make sure you take the sign in front of the term. Since that was plus 4m squared, I'll put plus 4m squared. The negative came with the negative 10m. Next, I'm going to look at my MWs. Notice I have two terms with MW. I have negative 11 MW and I have negative 5 MW. So I take the sign with it, negative 11 MW minus 5 MW. And then we'll take a look at the W squares. So that's what's left over. I got a negative 7W squared and a plus 12W squared. So I'm going to group those together. Negative 7W squared plus 12W squared. And then I'm going to combine my like terms. Now again, that line that I wrote there in all those colors, that's not really required. A lot of people just do that in their head. Negative 10m squared over here plus 4m squared over here will give you negative 6m squared. Or you can look at it right here. Negative 10 added to a positive 4 is a negative 6m squared. Now, if you struggled with that, or you used your calculator because you didn't know how to do it, remember when you add a negative and a positive together, you subtract the numbers and you keep the sign of the larger. So 10 minus 4 is 6, but since the heavier number, 10, is negative, my answer is negative. Now here, I'm adding two negatives together. If you always think plus, negative 11 plus a negative 5, that's easier than saying negative 11 subtract 5. But it's the same answer either way. It's negative 16 MW. That's like you're adding two negatives, which just gives you a bigger negative. And then down here, I got negative 7W squared. I'm adding to a 12W squared. Now again, opposite signs means I subtract. I keep the sign of the heavier one, which is positive in this case. So plus 5W squared. One more point I want to make is, notice when you add like terms, the term doesn't change. I added m squareds to m squareds. I'm going to get m squareds. I'm not going to get m to the fourth. Exponents only change when you multiply them together, not when you add or subtract them. So this MW stayed MW, and this W squared stayed W squared. And this is the final result.